What would you do if saving one life put you at the center of a war you never knew existed? In the rugged Montana Territory of 1883, rancher Marcus Sullivan thought he was just helping a sick young woman when he found her collapsed near his water well. Using herbal remedies he'd learned from an old Army medic, he nursed her back to health over 3 desperate days, never knowing her true identity. But when she disappeared as mysteriously as she'd arrived, Marcus thought that was the end of it. He was wrong. 3 days later, he woke to find his entire ranch surrounded by a silent line of Crow warriors on horseback. They weren't there to attack. They weren't even moving. They just sat on their horses like statues carved from stone, blocking every trail, every path, every possible escape route from his property. No demands, no negotiations, no explanation. Just an impenetrable wall of native warriors who seemed prepared to wait forever. What Marcus didn't know was that the young woman he'd saved was the chief's daughter, and that her mysterious illness was no accident. Someone had tried to murder her with an ancient tribal poison, and by saving her life, Marcus had unknowingly chosen a side in a blood feud that had been raging for generations. Now he was about to discover that in the world of tribal justice, every act of healing comes with a price, and sometimes that price is becoming a warrior in someone else's war. The Montana wind carried the scent of coming snow as Marcus Sullivan guided his horse along the fence line that marked the northern boundary of his ranch. At 45, he moved with the careful economy of a man who'd learned to conserve his strength for the battles that mattered. 20 years of ranching in the territory had taught him that every calorie spent had to earn its keep, whether wrestling cattle or mending the endless miles of barbed wire that kept his herd contained. It was November 12, 1883, and Marcus was checking his water sources before the first hard freeze of winter. The natural spring that fed his main well had been running slower than usual, and he needed to clear any debris that might be blocking the flow. His ranch sat in a valley between 2 ridges, isolated enough that his nearest neighbor lived 15 miles south, but positioned perfectly to take advantage of the mountain runoff that made cattle ranching possible in this harsh landscape. Marcus had just dismounted to examine the spring when he heard it, a sound so faint he might have mistaken it for wind through the aspens. But there it was again, a low moan, weak and pain-filled, coming from somewhere near the cluster of boulders that surrounded his well. His hand moved instinctively to the Colt revolver at his hip as he approached cautiously. Relations between white settlers and the Crow Nation had been tense since the railroad. Survey crews had started mapping routes through traditional hunting grounds. Just last month, there had been reports of cattle theft and burned barns, though nobody could prove whether the incidents were the work of native raiders or white troublemakers looking to stir up conflict. What Marcus found behind the largest boulder made his breath catch in his throat. A young Native American woman lay crumpled against the stone, her body racked with fever and her breathing shallow and labored. She appeared to be Crow, based on the distinctive beadwork on her buckskin dress and the way her long black hair was braided with colored threads. She couldn't have been more than 20 years old, with delicate features that spoke of careful breeding and the kind of jewelry that indicated high status within her tribe. But what alarmed Marcus most was her condition. Her skin burned with fever, her lips were cracked and bleeding, and dark veins were visible beneath the bronze skin of her arms and neck, symptoms he recognized from his days as an Army medic during the Civil War. This wasn't a normal illness. This was poisoning. Marcus knelt beside her and gently touched her forehead. The heat radiating from her skin was intense enough that he could feel it through his calloused palm. Her eyes fluttered open at his touch, dark brown and intelligent, but clouded with pain and delirium. She spoke a few words in what he assumed was Crow, her voice barely a whisper. When he responded in English, she switched languages, her accent thick, but her words clear. Help. Me. The smart thing would be to ride for town and bring back the territorial doctor. The safe thing would be to avoid getting involved in what might be tribal business. But Marcus had seen these symptoms before, during the war, when Confederate spies had tried to poison Union water supplies with a plant-based toxin that caused exactly this kind of fever and circulatory collapse. "Easy there, miss," Marcus said, softly, slipping his arms under her body. She weighed almost nothing, her frame weakened by whatever poison was coursing through her system. "You're sick, but I think I can help. Just need to get you somewhere warm." Marcus carried her to his ranch house, a modest but solid structure he built stone by stone during his first years in the territory. He laid her on his own bed, covered her with every blanket he owned, and began preparing the remedies he'd learned from Dr. Samuel Chun, a Chinese immigrant who'd served as an unofficial medic for Marcus's unit during the siege of Vicksburg. Dr. Chun had taught him that certain plant-based poisons could be countered with specific herbal antidotes, but the treatment had to be administered quickly and in precise doses. Too little, and the patient died. Too much, and the cure became as deadly as the poison. Marcus worked through the night, brewing teas from willow bark and echinacea, preparing poultices from plants he'd gathered and dried during the summer months. He forced the young woman to drink small amounts of liquid every few minutes, monitoring her pulse and temperature with the focused intensity of a man who understood that time was running out. As he worked, Marcus found himself studying her face. Even weakened by illness, she possessed a dignity and strength that reminded him of his sister Elizabeth, who had died of typhoid during the war. This girl was somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, and he'd be damned if he was going to let her die on his watch. "What's your name?" he asked during one of her lucid moments, as he helped her sip another dose of the bitter tea that seemed to be slowly driving the poison from her system. "Morning. Star," she whispered, her English coming more easily as the fever broke. "Daughter of Chief Iron Bear." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Chief Iron Bear was one of the most powerful leaders of the Crow Nation, a man whose word could mobilize hundreds of warriors or establish peace across thousands of square miles of territory. If this was his daughter, and if she died in Marcus's house. "Who did this to you?" Marcus asked gently. "This isn't a natural sickness. Someone poisoned you." Morning Star's eyes filled with a fury that burned brighter than her fever. "Blood Hawk," she said, the name coming out like a curse. "Sioux warrior who wants to marry me when father refused his proposal." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus understood the implications. Bloodhawk had tried to kill Chief Iron Bear's daughter rather than accept rejection, probably hoping that her death would be blamed on white settlers and spark a war. That would give him opportunities for glory and revenge. Over the next 2 days, Marcus nursed Morning Star back to health with a dedication that surprised him. He'd lived alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to care for another person, to have someone depend entirely on his skill and attention. As her strength returned, she began to help with small tasks around the house, and Marcus found himself enjoying conversations with someone who saw the world from a completely different perspective. Morning Star told him about life in the Crow camps, about the delicate balance of power between different tribal factions, and about the pressure young women faced to make marriages that served political purposes rather than personal happiness. In return, Marcus shared stories of his war experiences, his decision to leave civilization behind for the isolation of the frontier, and his struggles to build something lasting in a land that seemed determined to break anyone who challenged it. On the morning of the third day, Morning Star announced that she was strong enough to travel. "I must return to my people," she said, though Marcus could see reluctance in her eyes. "My father will be searching for me, And if warriors find me here, I understand, Marcus replied, though he felt an unexpected sadness at the prospect of returning to his solitary existence. But before you go, you need to know this bloodhawk might try again. The poison he used was sophisticated, the kind that requires knowledge of both plants and preparation. He's not going to give up easily. Morning Star nodded grimly. I know, but I am the daughter of Iron Bear. I will not hide from my enemies. Marcus prepared supplies for her journey, food, water, and a small pouch of the antidote herbs in case she encountered the poison again. As she prepared to leave, Morning Star surprised him by taking his hands in hers. You have given me my life back, she said formally. Among my people, this creates a debt that can never be forgotten. Whatever happens, know that Morning Star, daughter of Iron Bear, will remember Marcus Sullivan as a man of honor. She disappeared into the morning mist like a vision, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the lingering scent of the herbal remedies that had saved her life. He returned to his normal routine, checking cattle and mending fences, trying to convince himself that the past 3 days had been nothing more than an unusual interruption in his quiet existence. But as he worked, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Morning Star's visit had changed something fundamental about his relationship with the land and the people who lived on it. He'd crossed a line that most white settlers never dared to cross, and he suspected there would be consequences he couldn't yet imagine. 3 days later, as he rode out to check his northern fence line, Marcus discovered just how right he'd been. The consequences of his compassion were about to surround him in ways that would test everything he thought he knew about justice, loyalty, and survival on the Montana frontier. The morning mist was just beginning to lift when Marcus saw them. A perfect line of Crow warriors on horseback stretched across every possible exit from his property, sitting as still as statues and twice as silent. They weren't there to thank him. They weren't there to attack him. They were there for something else entirely, something that would challenge every assumption Marcus had made about the simple act of saving a life. The debt was about to be collected, but not in any way he could have anticipated. Marcus reined in his horse so abruptly that the animal snorted in protest, her hooves skidding slightly on the frost-covered grass. What he saw before him defied immediate comprehension. A line of Crow warriors stretched across his northern fence line, each rider perfectly spaced, perfectly still, their horses standing like carved monuments in the morning light. He counted quickly, 23 warriors visible from his position, but the line extended beyond his line of sight in both directions, following the natural contours of the valley. Each man was armed with traditional weapons, bows, war clubs, and steel knives, but also carried rifles that gleamed with the oil of careful maintenance. These weren't raiders or young braves seeking glory. These were seasoned warriors under strict discipline. What unnerved Marcus most was their absolute stillness. They didn't talk among themselves, didn't shift in their saddles, didn't even seem to breathe. They simply sat and watched him with the patient intensity of predators who had all the time in the world. Marcus turned his horse and rode quickly toward his eastern boundary, hoping to find a way out of the valley that wasn't blocked. What he discovered there made his heart sink. Another line of warriors, equally spaced, equally silent, positioned to prevent any escape in that direction. A quick reconnaissance of his southern and western boundaries confirmed his worst fears. His entire ranch was surrounded by what appeared to be most of the Crow Nation's fighting force, arranged in a perfect perimeter that turned his property into an open-air prison. But they made no aggressive moves. When Marcus rode close enough to clearly see individual faces, the warriors simply watched him approach without raising weapons or giving any sign of hostility. When he waved tentatively at one of them, the man nodded slightly but remained otherwise. Motionless, it was the most terrifying non-attack Marcus had ever experienced. Returning to his house, Marcus found a surprise waiting on his front porch. Morning Star, sitting in his rocking chair as if she'd never left, wearing traditional ceremonial dress that spoke of formal tribal business rather than a casual visit. "You came back," Marcus said, dismounting and approaching the porch cautiously. "I never left," Morning Star replied, her voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there during her recovery. "Not really. The moment you saved my life, certain wheels were set in motion that cannot be stopped." Marcus settled into the chair beside her, his rifle across his lap, but pointed away from her, a gesture of caution without hostility. "Are you here to explain why your father has my ranch surrounded?" "My father knows nothing of this," Morning Star said quietly. "He believes I am still recovering in the Women's Lodge, attended by tribal healers. The warriors you see are not here on his orders." The implications of that statement sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "Then who ordered them here?" "Blood Hawk," Morning Star said, her voice carrying the same fury Marcus had heard when she'd first spoken the name. "When I returned to my people and told them how you saved my life, he claimed that you had violated tribal law by interfering in Crow business. He demanded that the Warrior Council take action against you." Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. "He's using me as a scapegoat. If he can't kill you directly, he'll provoke a conflict between your people and the white settlers, hoping the chaos will give him another opportunity. Yes, but there is more." Morning Star's expression grew even more serious. "Blood Hawk has convinced many of the young warriors that your actions were part of a larger conspiracy, that white settlers are using medicine and trickery to weaken Crow resistance to territorial expansion. That's insane. I saved your life." "I know that. You know that. But Blood Hawk is a persuasive speaker, and there have been too many incidents lately: stolen cattle, burned barns, mysterious illnesses affecting our horses. He has woven these events into a story that makes you look like the advance scout for a larger invasion." Marcus looked out at the ring of warriors surrounding his property. "So what happens now? Do they wait for me to make a mistake so they can justify attacking?" "No," Morning Star said firmly. "They wait for you to prove your innocence through trial by combat." The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a distant fire. Marcus had heard of such things during his army days, traditional native justice systems that required accused parties to defend themselves through physical contests that supposedly allowed the spirits to determine guilt or innocence. "Trial by combat," Marcus repeated slowly. "Against who?" "Blood Hawk, of course. He has made the formal challenge, claiming that you used evil medicine to bewitch me, and that only combat can reveal the truth of your intentions." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "I'm 45 years old with a bad knee and a shoulder that aches when it rains. Blood Hawk is what? 25? 30? This isn't justice. It's execution." "Not necessarily," Morning Star said, leaning forward in her chair. "Crow law allows for the accused to choose a champion to fight in his place, provided the champion has a legitimate connection to the case. I don't suppose you know anyone who might be willing to risk their life for a white rancher they barely know?" Morning Star smiled for the first time since she'd returned. "Actually, I do. But first, you need to understand exactly what you're fighting for." She stood and walked to the edge of the porch, gesturing toward the surrounding warriors. "This is not just about my life or your actions, or even Blood Hawk's ambitions. This is about the future of our people's relationship with white settlers. If Blood Hawk wins, he gains enormous influence within the tribe, and his faction will push for all-out war against the territorial government. And if he loses, then the moderate voices gain strength, and there's a chance for real negotiation between our peoples. My father has been trying to find a peaceful solution to the land disputes for years, but he's been blocked by warriors who believe that violence is the only language white men understand. Marcus absorbed this information, understanding that he'd somehow become a crucial piece in a much larger game of political chess. Who's willing to serve as my champion? Someone who has his own reasons for wanting to see Bloodhawk defeated, Morningstar said. Someone who understands that your act of healing was not an act of war, but an act of the kind of honor that both our peoples should respect. She pointed toward the eastern line of warriors, where Marcus could see a figure separating from the group and riding slowly toward the house. As the rider approached, Marcus recognized him as one of the older warriors, perhaps 50 years old, with gray threading through his long black hair and scars that spoke of many battles. That is Spotted Wolf, Morningstar explained. He is my mother's brother, which makes him my blood family. More importantly, he is one of the greatest warriors in Crow history, and he has been waiting for an opportunity to challenge Bloodhawk's growing influence within the tribe. Spotted Wolf dismounted at the base of the porch and spoke in rapid Crow to Morningstar, who translated for Marcus. He says that he has been watching you for 3 days, observing how you interact with the warriors around your property. He says that you show no fear, but also no aggression, the behavior of a man with a clear conscience. The warrior turned to Marcus and spoke in heavily accented but clear English. You ... saved. Daughter of my sister. This makes ... debt between us. I will ... fight for you ... if you accept. Marcus looked at the weathered face of the warrior, seeing dignity and strength that reminded him of the best officers he'd served under during the Thung. War. What happens if you lose? Spotted Wolf's expression didn't change. Then I die ... with honor. And you die? Knowing someone believed in your ... innocence. And if you win? Then Bloodhawk learns that poison ... is weapon of cowards. And perhaps ... our peoples find ... better way to solve differences. Marcus stood and extended his hand to Spotted Wolf, who grasped it in the traditional warrior's grip he'd learned from other native veterans during the war. I accept your offer, Marcus said formally, and I'm honored to have a warrior of your reputation willing to stand for me. Spotted Wolf nodded and spoke again in Crow. Morningstar translated. He says the combat will take place at dawn tomorrow, in the meadow beside your well, the place where you first found me. He says it is fitting that the place where healing began should be the place where justice is decided. As Spotted Wolf mounted his horse and rode back to rejoin the warrior line, Marcus felt the weight of the approaching confrontation settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. Tomorrow, 2 men would fight to the death because he had chosen to save a life rather than let someone die. Is there anything else I should know? Marcus asked Morningstar. Yes, she said quietly. Bloodhawk has been boasting that he will use a special weapon in the combat, a war club blessed by a Sioux medicine man and supposedly imbued with the power to defeat any enemy. He believes this will give him an advantage over Spotted Wolf. Marcus felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. It's not blessed, is it? It's poisoned. Morningstar's expression confirmed his suspicion. We believe so. The same poison he used on me probably applied to the striking surface of the club. Even a small cut could be fatal. Then we need to warn Spotted Wolf. Dawn broke over the Montana Valley, painting the eastern sky in reds and golds that seemed to foretell the blood to be spilled. Marcus watched from his kitchen window as a circle of Crow warriors sat motionless on their horses, having kept their silent vigil all night. Morningstar, daughter of Chief Iron Bear, emerged from his guest room at first light, dressed in ceremonial white buckskin adorned with beadwork and eagle feathers, her hair braided with sacred stones that shimmered like stars. When Marcus remarked, "It looked like she was dressed for a funeral," Morningstar replied gravely that today, indeed, something would end. Either Bloodhawk would die, and his poisonous influence over the young warriors with him, or Spotted Wolf would fall, and the voice of wisdom be silenced among their people. Through the window, Marcus saw warriors dismount and form a circle around the meadow where he had found Morning Star 3 days before. In the center, 2 men prepared for battle: Spotted Wolf, veteran and calm, and Bloodhawk, younger, painted for war, projecting bravado he did not truly feel. Marcus asked Morning Star about Bloodhawk. She explained he was a Sioux outcast, taken in by her father 5 summers ago, who repaid kindness by trying to kill her when she refused him. Bloodhawk preached that strength was the only virtue, that peace with whites led to slavery and death. He had gathered followers among the young. Marcus noticed something dark on Bloodhawk's war club and realized it was poisoned. But Morning Star warned that Crow law required proof witnesses or evidence, which they did not have. Spotted Wolf would have to fight as if it were a fair contest. Spotted Wolf arrived at the door, dressed simply for battle. Morning Star tried to warn him about the poisoned weapon, but he refused to change his tactics, saying a warrior's honorable death was better than a life of dishonor. Marcus offered to fight in his place, but Spotted Wolf declined, citing the sacred bond between their families since Marcus had saved Morning Star's life. They walked to the meadow, surrounded by Crow warriors. White settlers, including the sheriff, judge, and powerful ranchers, watched from the edge, making the fight a public event with implications for the entire region. Chief Iron Bear officiated, announcing the combat would determine the truth of the accusations against Marcus. The fight would continue until one warrior yielded, was incapacitated, or died. Bloodhawk challenged, accusing Marcus of bewitching Morning Star with trickery and poison. Spotted Wolf responded quietly, saying he fought for family honor and the truth of healing, for saving life was always sacred. The 2 warriors circled each other, beginning a deadly dance. Bloodhawk attacked first with his poisoned club, but Spotted Wolf dodged and countered with his tomahawk. The sound of their weapons meeting echoed across the valley. Marcus realized this was more than a trial by combat. It was a battle of philosophies, of honor, of futures for the Crow, and their relationship with the white world. As the fight raged, Marcus and Morning Star exchanged anxious glances, both knowing Spotted Wolf faced not just Bloodhawk, but the poison on his weapon. One strike could end it all. The outcome would determine not only Marcus's fate, but the future of peace in the Montana Territory. The combat had raged for nearly an hour when Spotted Wolf began to tire, his movements precise but slower. Bloodhawk, young and strong, pressed hard with his poisoned club, dark streaks marking the air. Marcus watched, fists clenched, as Spotted Wolf was pushed to the defensive, the poison staining his buckskin. "He's wearing him down," Marcus whispered. "Just one scratch and it's over." But Morning Star saw her uncle's strategy. He was learning Bloodhawk's patterns, waiting for his chance. Bloodhawk's club finally struck, tearing through Spotted Wolf's shoulder. The crowd gasped, expecting instant collapse from the poison, but Spotted Wolf stood firm. Morning Star called out in Crow, and her uncle confirmed. He had drunk the antidote herbs, building resistance. Marcus realized Spotted Wolf had planned for this all along. Bloodhawk, furious, accused Spotted Wolf of cheating. Spotted Wolf answered, voice strong, that he used the medicine of truth and healing, shared by Marcus, the white man who saved Morning Star. "If healing protects me from your poison, the spirits declare healing stronger than killing." The watching Crow murmured, their respect shifting. Bloodhawk, desperate, attacked wildly, and Spotted Wolf, seizing his chance, drove his knife deep. Bloodhawk fell, his dishonor revealed. Chief Iron Bear declared Bloodhawk guilty of poisoning and Marcus innocent, welcoming him as a brother to the Crow people. Afterward, Marcus's ranch became a place of peace and healing, where Crow and white settlers gathered, learning from each other. The debt was paid, but friendship had no end. Spotted Wolf gave Marcus a ceremonial club, symbolizing that healing was stronger than any weapon. As winter came, the valley knew peace, and Marcus knew he had found a true home.